Hi, welcome back to Mindscape Matters, a channel to discuss mental health and more. And I am Dr. Mohan Raj. I'm a consultant psychiatrist based in Chennai, and I'll be your guide as we explore this landscape together. Have you ever been in a neighborhood where somebody was trying to establish a small mental hospital? Have you seen the agitation that the neighbors go into trying to somehow prevent the hospital from coming there? Sometimes they react the same even when somebody is trying to establish a school for special children. The neighbors will call for an association meeting, they'll call everyone, including the proposed school people, and they will ask, are you going to use the common facilities like the park and the playground? How will you ensure the safety of our children or our normal children? They want to know whether the special children will harm their normal children, so-called normal children. Special children are like anybody else, just that they have a developmental delay. Now coming back to mental illness, there is a popular notion that people with mental illness are dangerous. Let's explore where this notion comes from. Anything unknown causes intense anxiety and people try to avoid it. The most important unknown is future, and people are anxious about it, but they can't avoid it because whether you want it or not, future comes to you. Everything else people try to avoid, including mental illness or people with mental illness. In addition to lack of knowledge, there is misinformation about mental illness in the media, both news media and creative media. Now, when there were 4 similar murders in Chennai a few years ago, the news media went into an overdrive trying to speculate that there is a serial killer on the prowl and the serial killer could be having some major mental illness, and they were trying to recruit people to interview them about what kind of mental illness can make somebody a serial killer. Now, here is a situation where the police do not know whether it's the same person who killed 4 people or 4 different people. But media has already decided it's a serial killer and a mentally ill serial killer. Whenever something like this happens, the media will want to assure themselves and their audience that the world is still very, very predictable. When something like this unpredictable happens, there has to be something abnormal like a mental illness. In the Western news media, whenever there is a mass shooting, if the perpetrator is a person of color, the news media will have no hesitation and they will dub him as a terrorist. But whenever the perpetrator is not a person of color, the news media will say, according to a distant uncle or according to his sister, he had some mental health issues. Now, this is a stereotyped way of presenting news about a mass shooter for many, many years, and this has made many people associate mental illness and a violent crime. In high-profile murder trials, you would have often heard the defense lawyer repeatedly telling the media that my client has a mental health issue, has a mental illness, and you'll be wondering, why are they repeatedly saying this? Now, they have a purpose, because there is a law which protects the mentally ill persons. That is, if a crime is committed under the influence of a specific symptom, then the criminal responsibility comes down. We will discuss about it later. So, the punishment can be reduced, that instead of death you might get life, or instead of life you might get a slightly lesser sentence. And lawyers will do anything to get the punishment reduced, including quoting mental illness, whether it is there or not. And media laps it up in a high profile murder case and will keep discussing about the connection between mental illness and a violent crime. Now moving on to movies. Whenever they want to indulge in mindless violence, they indulge. But before the movie ends, they would say the hero has a big mental illness and that explains his violence. And when you ask the directors why, they say, oh, I have to make it believable. I have to tell them the reason for his violent behavior. Now, whom do you want to make believe? In our movies, the hero would jump from the 20th floor onto a moving lorry and they will land like this. They won't even fall down. And they continue fighting. Now, if people can believe that, why wouldn't they believe if you say, oh, he has a violent streak or he's a violent person? Why give them a label of mental illness? Are people with mental illness actually dangerous? If you ask me, I would say no. Because mental illness is not one thing. There are a spectrum of illnesses, starting with mild, commonplace illnesses like depression, anxiety, OCD, panic, phobia, then slightly more complex illnesses like delusional disorder, schizophrenia, and bipolar disorders. Then you have old age illnesses like dementia and related disorders, childhood disorders. There is a whole spectrum. Of all these mental illnesses, the only illnesses that have been associated with violence in the literature are delusional disorder and schizophrenia. Speaking of schizophrenia and violent behavior, there is this study where it's not just the diagnosis of schizophrenia. Psychiatrists assessed that these persons are at high risk for violent behavior. This study says that you had to take 35,000 such people and detain them to prevent one violent crime. Now, that is the statistics. In the rare incidence of a person with schizophrenia indulging in a violent crime, there is always a substance involved. Alcohol, cannabis, or one another drug. Now, all of you know that with or without mental illness, whenever a person is taking a substance, when they are intoxicated, their judgment comes down and they do not know what they are doing or its consequences, and they might end up doing a violent act. In another landmark study, they looked at violent incidences in a particular place, in a particular period, and they estimated that only 4% of the violent incidences could be related directly to mental illnesses. Another sobering statistics from this study is that people with chronic mental illness living in the community were most often the victims of violent crimes rather than being perpetrators. We looked at a popular myth, we looked at why it is being perpetuated, and we also looked at the actual evidence. Media should be mindful and avoid speculating about mental illness when there is no evidence. Coming to creative media, come on, be more creative in trying to explain violent behavior. And next time when somebody tells you that the persons with mental illness can be dangerous, you know what to tell them. Thank you for watching this far. If you like this video, tell 4 of your friends. And if one of them will want to watch this in Tamil, tell them the same content is available in Tamil also. We'll meet next week. Till then, Mindscape matters. Bye.